Hello. Today we're going to talk about adding and subtracting rational numbers, and honestly the focus is going to be on adding rational numbers. When we're talking about adding rational numbers, many times we're talking about numbers that have positives and negatives or zeros in them. An integer is a set of whole numbers, their opposites, and zero. We have an example here of -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. -2 and 2 are opposites because one is negative and one is positive. The same thing with -1 and 1. And then 0 is an integer, but it does not have an opposite. You'll notice that they also do not have fractions or decimals attached to these numbers. A rational number is a number that can be expressed as a ratio of two integers, a divided by b, or a over b, where b cannot be 0. Rational numbers include fractions, terminating decimals, and repeating decimals. Remember that terminating decimals are decimals that end, and repeating decimals are decimals that continue on, but have a repetition of one or more digits. Examples of rational numbers are -3 and 8/10, -1/2, 0, 1 and 7/10 repeating, and then we also have a mixed number here of 12 and 3/8. The additive inverse of a number is its opposite. The number and its additive inverse have the same absolute value. That means that they are each the same distance from 0 on a number line. And we saw this when we were talking about our integers of -2 and 2. We said they were opposite of each other. They make an additive inverse of each other because if I take -2 plus +2, I will get 0. And here's an example to show that. So we have a sum of -3 plus 3. We know that -3 and 3 are opposites. So we're going to use the additive inverse operation to determine what the sum is. I can start with a number line, and I can locate the -3 on the number line. And because I'm adding 3 to it, that means I'm going to move to the right 3 places. So there's 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to land at 0. This is proof positive that if I find the sum of two numbers that are the opposite of each other, I will get 0. That's your additive inverse. When we're adding integers, we have a couple of rules to follow. The first one is looking at the signs. No matter which rule you use, that's the first thing you need to do, is to look at the signs of the numbers that you're adding, and that's going to help you decide if you're going to use rule 1 or rule 2. If the signs are the same, we're going to add and keep the same sign. So if I have two positives, I'm just going to add those two numbers together, and it's going to be positive because these two numbers were positive. The sum of two positive integers is always going to be positive. If I have two negatives, a negative plus a negative, I'm going to get a negative. I'm just going to add these two. Negative follows through because they are nothing but negative. So just the sign just follows through. So the sum of two negative numbers is always going to be negative. Rule 2 is if the signs are different. What you're going to do is you're going to subtract the numbers, and actually you're going to subtract the absolute values of the numbers, and then use the sign of the larger number. So our first example here is a negative plus a positive. We're going to subtract the two numbers, and then we're going to take the sign of the bigger number, or the one that has the most signs. So say I have -7 plus 5. There are different signs. This is a negative, this is a positive. So I'm going to take 7 minus 5, and that's going to give me 2. I need to know, is this going to be a positive or a negative? Well, when I look back at my problem, I have 7 negatives, or I have 5 positives. Well, that means I have more negatives. So my answer is going to be a -2. In this case, I have a positive plus a negative. We're going to again subtract the numbers and then take the sign of the bigger number. So say I have 2 minus, plus -3. I'm going to take 2 and -3. The absolute values are 3 and 2. I'm going to subtract those two and get 1. To know if this is a positive or a negative, I would need to see how many I have. I have 2 positives and 3 negatives. Well, 3 negatives is more than 2 positives, so my answer is going to be a -1. The sum of the positive and negative integers is sometimes positive, sometimes negative, and sometimes it's 0, as we saw in our earlier example. The sum of a negative number and its opposite is always going to be 0. We have some to practice. We have 3 plus 6. They are both positive, so I'm going to add. So 3 plus 6 is 9. They are both positive, so my answer is positive. Example B, I have negative 12 plus negative 34. Are my signs the same or are they different? They are the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add these two. So I have 12 and 34. That would be 46. The sign used in my sum is negatives, so my answer is negative. And I would do the same thing for example C and example D.